Hello everyone, welcome to Study Room. This is Anvesha, your biology educator, and in this chapter, we'll be studying about how organisms reproduce. We'll be studying about the reproduction in different kind of organisms, and we'll be also studying about the different types of reproduction as such as asexual reproduction, sexual reproduction, and we'll be talking about the sexual reproduction specifically in humans. So let us see what we have in store for this chapter. Reproduction. What is reproduction? Reproduction is the process by which living organisms produce new individuals similar to themselves. So they are similar, okay, but they are not exactly identical. They are very similar, and many times in different kinds of reproduction, there are identical reproduction as well. There are identical um, uh, offsprings as well, but if we can say that they are similar to each other, okay. And why do we reproduce? So there's this first paragraph of your book, NCERT book, where you find that they have asked that what is the significance of this whole process of reproduction. We do not need this for carrying out the important life processes such as metabolism, digestion, and movement and all these things. But why is it so essential for human beings to for living things actually to reproduce? So the answer to this question is that it ensures the continuity of life on Earth. Okay, so we are continuing to live on this planet for millions of years, and why have we sustained so hard? Why have we sustained till this time, and why is it so important? So we have sustained on this earth just because we have a phenomena in ourselves known as reproduction. So unicellular organisms can reproduce asexually. Multicellular and highly differentiated organisms require two individuals for reproduction. So we have talked here about two types of reproduction that generally takes place. The first is asexual reproduction and the second is sexual reproduction. So asexual reproduction generally takes place in unicellular organisms, and the sexual reproduction takes place in multicellular and highly differentiated organisms where they need two individuals for reproduction. Okay. Now we'll be studying about the DNA copying. How does the DNA is copied for reproduction and how this process actually happens. So there's this basic event in reproduction which is known as the creation of a DNA copy. So cells use chemical reactions to build copies of their DNA, right? And that copy of the DNA is further transferred into the offspring. The process of copying the DNA may have some variation each time. As a result, the DNA copies generated will be similar but may not be identical to the original. So, as we talked in the first place, that these are similar reproduction process. Okay, the offsprings that are produced are similar to their parents. Okay, so they may not be identical because there may be some variation each time while the process of copying of DNA is going on. So why are variations happening in individuals? The variations are happening because the copying of DNA, in the process of copying of DNA, the variations happen, and it is not exactly the same DNA is not copied to the offspring. So that is why there is this variation that occurs in the offspring and continues generation after generation, and variations occur in different individuals. Okay. What is the importance of copying DNA during reproduction? So it helps in transfer of character from one parent to offspring. It maintains the characteristics in different generation of species, and it produces variations which is useful for the survival of species for long time. So here we have three important factors which actually signify the importance of copying of DNA while reproduction. Okay, so the first factor is that it helps in the transfer of character. Then second is it maintains the characteristics of the species in different generations, and the third is it produces variations which has helped in the survival of the species for long time. So these are very, very important factors which signify the importance of the copying of DNA during reproduction. And what is the importance of this variation? As we studied that variation is a very important factor, and there are variations that occur during the process of DNA replication. Now, what is the importance of this whole mechanism of variation? For the survival of some species become difficult due to change in the environmental conditions. So at that time, those species need to evolve themselves in order to survive. And this evolution, the process of evolution results due to a very important thing, that is variation. Okay. Thus, variation takes place for their survival and increases their chance of survival in this newly changed environment. And that is why this is a very, very important process to survive on this planet. And the species have survived so long, for a long, long time, just because they have this whole opportunity to evolve due to this event called variation. Okay. So if there is a population of bacteria living in temperate waters, and if the water temperature were to be increased by global warming, as you all know that we have this whole problem of global warming that is going on, in the modern times. So most of these bacteria would die, but the few variants that are resistant to the heat would survive and grow further. Okay, so this is the variation that is resulting into the evolution of that species, and that is resulting into the survival of the resistant variants. Okay, and that is how the resistant variants will again reproduce generation by generation and increase the population of the bacteria. Thus, variation is a very useful process for the survival of species over time, and it has proved to be so since centuries. Here we will be studying about the modes of reproduction in organisms. So let us see what are the modes of reproduction based on the kind of organisms that actually show that kind of reproduction. So here we have two types of modes of reproduction: asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. For asexual reproduction, you can see these are the kinds of organisms that actually show asexual reproduction, and for sexual reproduction, you can see that these are the kind of organisms, like these are the modes of reproduction for sexual organisms, right? Now, what is the difference between these two kinds of reproduction, the asexual and sexual reproduction? Asexual reproduction involves one parent only. So the number of parents actually differ in these two types of reproduction. Sexual reproduction involves two organisms. Okay. And asexual reproductions, the gametes are not produced. Here we do not have any production of gametes. But in sexual reproduction, we have production of gametes. Okay. In asexual reproduction, the offsprings are genetically identical to the parent. Okay, and in sexual reproductions, the offspring shows genetic variation. So as we talked about what was reproduction, in the definition we said that may be similar, but here we can see that in asexual reproduction, the offsprings are identical, but in sexual reproduction, the offspring show genetic variation. Okay. And in asexual reproduction, we have the cell division that takes place are only mitotic cell division. We know that there are two kinds of cell divisions that depends on the type of cell it happens. Okay, so we have mitotic division and we have meiotic division. That is mitosis and meiosis that goes on in different types of cells. Okay, these are the two types of cell division. So here in asexual reproduction, we have the mitotic divisions only. But in sexual reproductions, the gametes are produced. Since here we have the production of gametes, so these gametes are produced by meiotic divisions and zygote develops by mitotic divisions. So here we have two kinds of divisions that are happening. The gametes are produced by meiosis and the zygote develops by the process of cell division called mitosis. So here we have to remember that gametes gametes are related to meiosis, and zygote, the development of zygote, is related to mitosis division. So you need to remember these two kinds of, do not interchange, just kind of remember that the gametes are produced by meiosis and the zygote development is done by the process of mitosis, right? Let us see the in-text questions that we have. The first question is, what is the importance of DNA copying in reproduction? So DNA copying has many important features, that is, it maintains the characteristics of species, it maintains the continuity of life. From this, the characteristics and features of organisms are transformed to their progeny, right? The characteristics and features are transformed from the parent individual to the progeny. And the last one is, it produces variations in organisms, which is the basis of evolution of new species. So we have already discussed these 4 points in the previous slides, and we know that these 4 are the main important features of DNA copying in reproduction, right? The next question is, why is variation beneficial to the species but not necessarily for the individual? So we know that in order to continue the species generation by generation to sustain on this planet, we have this very good process, that is a characteristic called as variation. The various populations of organisms interact with many types of ecological niches, right? This is important for them to survive in given conditions. As we talked about the environmental conditions that the species or the individuals of the species are exposed to, right? So in order to combat those adverse environmental conditions and sustain the species on this planet, there is this important and beneficial variation called as beneficial process called as variation, right? In case of any damage caused to the ecological conditions of the population gets adversely affected. The organisms which are able to survive may reproduce to develop population which is adapted or suited to the varied condition. Hence, variation is beneficial to species but not to individuals, because only those individuals can survive who are resistant to those kind of adverse environmental conditions. So it is not beneficial for the individual, but it is wholly and largely beneficial for the species to sustain generation by generation on the planet, right? So this was about the introduction for reproduction. In the next lectures, we will be studying more about reproduction. That's all for this video. Thank you.